afternoon. Welcome to the Jefferson County Board of Education meeting on February 27th for the central office reorganization. If you would stand and join us for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Superintendent,
Yes, ma'am. You ready?
we're ready.
Okay. So, as the board's aware, you made one of the 5 goals that you set for me at the beginning of this school year to undergo a central office reorganization, to bring a proposal to you. And I've spent the last several months having those conversations and working through this process, and this is the result. And before I even get started, I would like to say thank you very much to the people who came today. They've put in an enormous amount of work with me, and no matter what they're here to say, I'm glad that they're here making sure that they get heard. It's important. So, there were a number of goals that the board tasked me with during this reorganization. It wasn't simply moving things around for the sake of moving things around or appearances. There were some very important concepts that the board wanted to make sure that I addressed when we went through this process. There's several among those. Number one, you wanted to make sure that we improved our focus on instruction. That's a whole purpose and why we're here, and sometimes we get distracted by a lot of other duties that we have. Number two, you've seen over time and you've heard a lot about the social, emotional, mental health needs of the students that we serve and how those have become so immense that in some ways our staff are increasingly overwhelmed with bringing the resources and the support to bear to deal with those. Several of the positions in the central office have been in the same configuration, the same job description for literally decades. And our mission and our purpose and the way that we do our work has changed over the time, and there's a lot of configurations that haven't necessarily changed with them. Several board members have talked about consistency. It's been a theme of this board. And when I say consistency, I mean consistency in service to the people who depend on us, who we serve, consistency in expectations of everyone in their work and in their customer service and in how they serve the people that we're responsible to, and consistency in compensation. We have a number of people in this office, and depending on when they got hired, whether they're doing the same job or not, or have the same title or not, they're doing the same amount of work and they're getting paid very different amounts because they have very different contracts simply based on when they got hired. Another one of the things that you asked me to address is that we don't have a lot of succession planning. When someone leaves, they take an enormous amount of institutional knowledge with them, and it's a struggle to fill that back in. We sometimes end up going over the same ground again because nobody else fully understood what that person did or spent the time doing that. Part of our strength is that we have one of the most, if not the most diverse school system in this entire state. We have a very large Hispanic population compared to everyone else. We have the largest ESL population. We have a very large African American population, and we set a number of goals for that as a school system, and we haven't achieved all of that. And we need to be more intentional in both celebrating that and in making sure that our instructional program and our practices align with ensuring every one of those individuals have great opportunities, and that we take advantage of their presence to make us stronger. Also, the building staff, because of all these reasons, the building staff are stressed. They're doing a lot of work, and they need increasingly more support from us, not less. The demands of get this for me, do this for me, I'm struggling, find some way to fix this problem is crushing. It's huge. There's a lot. So those were all the things that you tasked me with. And one of the things that I want to make sure is a foundation of this reorganization is that I address with the board and quite frankly with the public some of the things that led into this reorg and some of the things that were on my mind, because I think that there's a lot of mythology about central office staff. When you go out and have conversations with people in the public or out in the schools, you run into some, I would say, stereotypes about people in the central office, about the amount of work that they do, or the privileges that they have, or their work ethic, or their compensation. And I think some of that is just natural. People like to complain about their bosses. I have 5. I get it. You know what I mean? They do. I'm not looking at you, Miss
I
Kim.
don't understand.
No, I'm not looking at you. But people naturally like to complain about folks who have to make decisions, or folks who tell them things that they don't want to hear, or folks who control the purse strings, or I get that to a certain level, but I also get that there are a lot of untruths out there. And I think that even though we seem to be in a nearly post-factual world, I happen to still think facts matter. And some of these up here are very startling facts that I would like for you to have in your minds when you talk to people out in the community about the central office and about the central office staff. One of those is that every single year, the Office of School Finance compares a outstanding amount of data. I've put a link at the bottom of the slide, which you guys will have electronically, to be able to go to the page itself. And every single year they compile all of these statistics about every single position in the school system comparative to every single other one, using the exact same sort of apples to apples comparison. And one of those is that we have the 8th smallest central office in the state compared to the number of students that we have. And that's your best measure, because students, both being that relates to the ratio of professionals, staff that we have to support, and to the number of families that we have to support. So for every central office administrator who needs to answer questions from families, who needs to work and support building members, we have significantly less of those people to respond to significantly more of those requests and demands and expectations. Now, when I say central office, I just mean people sitting here in this central office. We have the 4th smallest building administrator to student ratio in the state. So part of that means that one of our biggest jobs is supporting building administrators. So we have a very small building administrator to student ratio, partially because we're very short on APs, on in buildings, particularly at elementary. But we also have combined, if you average those two numbers together, which the state does, and say all administration to sheer number of students, we're 5th. There's only 4 school systems in this entire state that has fewer central office folks who deal with more families and students than we do. All right? So in order to deal with that level of stress, basically you're asking the people in this office to do more work with more families than, folks in Mingo or McDowell or a host of other places. And usually, that's offset by some degree of compensation. So our principals are, 4th in the state for number of students that they have to deal with for each one of them, but they're the 7th highest paid in the state. Central office administrators, we're 49th out of 55 in the state. So I put for you a list at the bottom: Summers, Morgan, Gilmer, Webster, Monroe, and Calhoun. Those would be the 6 counties in the entire state where central office administrators on average are paid less than ours are. Now, some folks, there are probably a great number of reasons for that. Some of them have to do with seniority, okay? Older administrators, because of the way the compensation system is set up in West Virginia, older administrators make more money, all right? But I would posit to you, every other central office in the state, they're comparing apples to apples. Same secretaries to same secretaries, same assistant superintendents to same assistant superintendents, same directors to same directors. And 49th out of 55 for a school system that habitually ranks in the top 5 in academics and graduation rate and performance, I would say you're getting a heck of a lot of bang for your buck, right? And I don't think that that gets anywhere near the degree of recognition or respect that it should. And I get pretty frustrated about it, and I feel like there should be people who should be out there telling that story and should be garnering that respect. And I don't know that that always happens. So some of the other statistics that were startling to me, utterly startling, was that they do the same thing for every position in the state. So they have a chart that shows the ratio of professional staff in the system to number of students. And when I say professional, any job that requires a degree to the sheer number of students that you have. Ooh, we're second in the state. And when I say second in the state, I don't mean in a good way. I mean second highest number of students for every professional in this school system to meet their needs. The only one who had a higher number of students per professional, and I'm going to see Sheena Van Meter, who's a superintendent over there, is Hardy. It's the only school system in the state where their professional staff have a higher ratio of students to professionals than we do. I know, I see your face, Mr. Osborne. I called Amy up, who's the head of the Office of School Finance, and they pull the exact same report, exact same number of degree professionals who respond to same number of students. And
so are we the reason they thought they could go to 31 students? Because we already do it.
Because we already do it. It's possible Jefferson does it. That could be. What was equally startling to me is that when it comes, because they do the same thing for service, when it comes to service, we're 36th. So we have a very low number of professionals to deal with a lot of students, and we have relatively out of the 55, and certainly compared to everything else, a very high number of service personnel to staff. And I will say a lot of that likely comes from, all due respect, comes from special education. We put aid on every single one of our special education buses. We have an enormous number of one-to-one aides and support aides in schools. But I would have thought that both professionals and service would have come in better than that, quite frankly. So again, some of this is conveying to our constituents, and the reason I put that link in there is anybody can go see it for themselves. I'm not monkeying this data. I'm not torturing it until it says what I want it to say. I simply went to the Office of School Finance statistics page and pulled it up. And it's there for every year back to, I think as far back as I looked was 2012. But anyone can go and see that. So partly I give you that information because the things that I'm going to talk about won't necessarily change all of that and address that. But I think you need to know those things while we're both looking at the central office and planning for our future, because I think it's important. So the other things that I want to make sure that you know going into this is I think you have an understanding, but I want to make sure of the degree to which social, emotional, mental health issues are absolutely without question one of the most enormous challenges we're facing now and we're going to be facing over the next several years. Our preschool programs are the front wave of, as you heard the other night, I think at the school board meeting where we asked for additional service staff for some preschool, one particular preschool student, but they're representative of a lot and just the sheer volume of services. We do have some social emotional standards. We're one of only 3 states in the entire country, partially because West Virginia has a set of issues that the rest of the country is only now beginning to grapple with. And we have some folks who think that because we're Jefferson and we're wealthy, it doesn't affect us as much. So I gave you some of the statistics here from DHHR about the number of households reporting domestic violence, substance abuse, the 5.5% of our entire population in the county who's been diagnosed with mental illness. The fact that in West Virginia, nearly 51 out of every 1,000 live births were children who were born with neonatal abstinence syndrome, who require a significant degree of support to be successful. Nearly half of all the children who came into custody in DHHR, and nearly 85% of the CPS cases involved drug use on the part of the parents. So those are all things that we know and that we've seen and that we've lived and that we've had conversations about in sort of feeding into this reorg. So when I talk about the reorg process, they know it, but just for you, I sat down with every single central office department. We had sort of a template. We did a face-to-face meeting, and they all shared their hopes and their dreams and their frustrations, and sort of their draft of their ideal. If I could have these things, I could do what I know needs to get done. Did that with everybody, and that was a huge list. And I have to say, everybody was realistic. They were like, I won't get all these things. I know that I won't, but I'm just telling you, and I need you to hear, and it was helpful for me. I need you to hear how overwhelmed and tired and frustrated I am of trying to save the world with my raft. And I feel like every time I pick somebody up, there's less room in it, and it's hard for people who got into it for all the right reasons, and they're frustrated. I started at that time and have continued to. Part of why I appreciate everybody being here is I said, this is our plan. If anything you like that you don't like, come in here and talk to me about it. And if you can build a better mousetrap, tell me. I want it to be the best one. The version, a little more detailed, that you have in front of you is draft 14. So we've made a lot of changes. I came back to JLT with sort of a draft from the individual departments and talked about whether or not people thought certain things would work and certain didn't. Some of them sort of came apart at the seams and they came back together and we worked it out. And then I met individually, face to face, with every single person who you're going to be affected in some way. Your job's going to change. Your contracts I'm proposing to change. Anything where you are going to have a change. I sat down one-on-one and said, here's what I'm proposing for you specifically. Tell me if you could think of a better way to do this. And quite frankly, several people did come back and say, I think you could do this differently, or I think this would be better. So the other thing that I did, which you saw the results of, is I sent a survey to the building staff outside of here, and I said, we're doing a central office reorg, and I want some feedback about how we're doing. They were brutally honest with us about our communication and our service level and our response times. And one of the reasons that I put in those statistics earlier is you get fewer people who have to serve and support more and more and more stressed out, overwhelmed people who have more problems. And guess what? You respond slower. You respond more chaotically. You respond sometimes because you're stressed out and overwhelmed, not in the way that your best self would want to be. And so we're asking people to do amazing things, both outside of this building, all due respect, they're drowning. And the folks up here feel like they're the ones who are supposed to have the lifeboats, and we're drowning too. So it's a pattern that we would very much like to get out of, and I'm not going to BS anybody that this plan is going to get us out of it. All right, I think you're all professional and cognizant enough to know that this is a baby step. But there's just a lot more to do, and I'm not going to stand up here and pretend like we got together and solved all these problems. We didn't. Okay, so I'm going to go department by department, and you have a sort of a more detailed, for everything that I have up here is just like a line item on the screen. I wrote to you kind of a mini description that said, and here's why we thought this was a good idea. Okay? So instruction, which is our primary function and focus, you heard during LSIC meetings from all of the buildings, they desperately want instructional coaches. They know we're trying to do some very ambitious instructional programs, and they've seen the ones that we've got traction on. In particular, I have to say, I think balanced literacy was a huge leap forward for us. And in Cindy's department, System 44, Unique, Ukaru, some programs. When we've introduced a program and we've given them support, we've said we're going to have trainings for you scheduled every month. We're going to have somebody come to you at the school and show you how to do it. Guess what? We're actually going to buy you the supplies to make sure that you can use to do it. Those are the ones they've gotten excited about. So the building administrators have said, yeah, and when you send somebody here and they work with my staff and then they go away and they say, I'll be back in 4 weeks to see how you're doing with that, it doesn't get as much traction. So the other piece of that is, and we'll get into this a little bit more later, is that our staff continue to see instruction and technology as two different things that they do. Like, we still have schools where they'll go through their day and then they'll take their children and they'll go, okay, we're going to go do technology now, and then we're going to go back to our instruction where technology doesn't have a whole lot to do with that. So I don't know about you, but I do not go through my day as a superintendent, and I don't think anybody else here does, and I go, hey, Janet, I'm going down the hall to do technology. I'll come back and do the rest of my job when I'm done with this part. Okay, it's silly. It's not a concept that exists out there in the real world. It continues to exist in our schools. I have to be honest, among a dismayingly large number of our staff. And part of that is because the positions that we have that were designed to help teachers figure that out, how to weave it in, have really become sort of de facto. My printer's jammed. I can't get my computer to turn on. Can you hook this up for me? And it's never what they were intended to do. So the idea is that we currently have the technology resource facilitator positions. We would convert all of those into instructional coach positions. Between that, the current instructional coaches who we have on staff in Title I and the people that we are contracting, we, with one addition, can place a full or half-time instructional coach in every single school. Some schools we'd be able to do full-time, but even the ones we couldn't do full-time, we could split half and half. We've sat down and looked at a formula based on level of need, how many students, how many teachers who are in their first 3 years, so they're newbies and need more support, what the school scores were. We laid it all out into a grid and did a formula and then ranked the schools. And the ones who are the neediest would get full-time, all the ones down to who are the less needy would still get half-time. Now, even converting everyone over, we still need one more full-time instructional coach position to have somebody in every single school. So one of my requests is to add an FTE of one full-time instructional coach, not for the central office, to be based out in the schools. All right? Staying in instruction, one of the things that I've asked is our current high school coordinator position. We have a number of coordinator positions throughout the central office, and every single one of them, except for one, is at 261. And the one that's not at 261 serves the largest number of students and staff of any level at our school system. They also help us run the summer program that we have, which is for high school students and credit recovery. And the only reason that they're not 261 happens to be when they were hired, because we were struggling with money at the time. Now, again, one of the things that was requested was consistency, and it is to this individual's credit that they knew they came on for 240 and they accepted it and haven't complained about it, haven't had a grievance, but they do the same amount of work, and in some ways more because they serve more people as any of our coordinators. They just get paid a lot less to do it and have to do it in less time or come in and do it on their own time. And while I understand, and I fully support that we aren't going to punish all of the other coordinators by saying, hey, you can do yours in 240. We're going to cut all your contracts by 3 weeks. I think it's equally blatantly unfair to say, hey, you're going to do the same work as all the other coordinators. We're just going to pay you 3 weeks less salary. All right. I would also point out that the reason that person's in that position is because we've gone through 3 of them in the last 4 years because no one stays there. because they can leave immediately, and especially if they were to go into one of our principal positions, make 10 grand more a year. All right, so it's hard to get somebody in there for a pretty important position. One of the other things that we decided when we talked through is the new virtual school initiative that we have. And right now, the program that we have in the school system that has the strongest technology base and is probably one of our most flexible used alternatives for students is CTE. We have a lot of students in that program who this is what keeps them in school. This is what gives them some flexibility to not go and sit for 6.5 hours a day in classes that they don't have the strongest interest in. And it seemed like a very good fit for CTE and virtual school, and us to start moving into an arena where we piece things together for kids. So you want to go be a coder and you want to take this certificate program, and then you want to do online English at Shepherd, and then you want to do a math class through Virtual West Virginia. Good for you. Do that. And we have got to get to that point, or quite frankly, charter schools at some point are going to eat us alive, because they're coming. They're going to keep pushing that because parents want, not because they want charter schools, they want flexibility. That's what they want. And either we offer it or they pay for it from somebody else. That's the reality of the future. So we need to get ahead of that curve. So the other part of this is instruction. If it's the most important thing that we do, we need to focus on it. And right now, in addition to instruction, Mr. Blanc also supervises IT, Title I, attendance, cultural diversity, staff development, homeless, at-risk, a number of other programs, all of which have their own rules, their own reports, their own staff. And at the end of the day, I think like anything else, you focus and you make more progress. And you do, you don't have all the distractions of I have to manage all of these other things. So doing that, we would convert that assistant superintendent position to a director of instruction position based on reduced responsibilities, but it would focus on nothing but and supervise nothing but instruction. Focus, focus, focus. The last of the instructional section, for reasons that I stated earlier, we would ask that we reinstate the CNI administrative assistant position to 261. That was originally 1.5 261 positions. They were both service, but it was 1.5 positions who were both 261. We cut those and made 1 240 professional position. And again, significant amount of work, same amount of work to be done as we had 1.5 folks doing. We just said, you only got 240 days to do it, get it done. And all of our other positions at that level are 261. So trying to address some of the inconsistencies and discrepancies. Technology, as I stated earlier, we want to have a shift in focus in that. So taking the facilitator portion of it away from the hardware, software, infrastructure portion of it. And basically, all of the teaching technology parts be in instruction, and all of the other parts be separate in IT. One of those is addressing some leftover service terminology and uses. Right now, our technical staff in IT are under service law called office equipment repairmen. You basically have to know how to put together a selectric typewriter and be able to figure out why the keys are sticking. However, though we put them under that title, they all are required to have at least an associate's degree and a certification, an A+ certification in technology. So one of the things that we're recommending is that we move all of those service positions to Tier 3 professional positions, which means it would require a degree and certification. Again, very important to us retaining staff. Those IT positions are very desirable, and we have had a significant, and I love them, but if you will have noted the youth of our, let's see, office equipment repairmen, part of that is because they're here a very short time, and then we inevitably have a conversation with them, and they've gone somewhere else, and they're making a 5-figure a year higher salary, which is a struggle for us, because then we get them in and we have to retrain. Part of, and I'll talk about designating a person, we have a lot of technology initiatives up here, and we've spoken with Mr. Hercules about having a specific IT person assigned to, when we have problems, we go to just that person so that they know all of the systems up here, instead of, as it is now, we randomly have different folks serve the central office. One of the things, our technology facilitator position, right now we have 2 facilitator positions up at the central office. One's at 210 and one's at 261. The person who's at 261 is our technology facilitator, and he approached me with, quite frankly, with this plan. Part of it, he and IT and instruction and operations, I think Ralph was in that conversation too, all got together and brought me this plan. I wish I could say that this part of it was mine, because it was brilliant, but no, it wasn't. He came and said, I think it's important that these positions get converted from the service to the Tier 3 professional, and I believe in it so much that I am requesting for you voluntarily to move my contract from 261 to 240 to help pay for it. And I'm comfortable with that, and I'm comfortable with the time. And you'll see that I have another facilitator position that we had a request in to move from 220 to 240 so they would be consistent with each other. It was a gallant move, quite frankly. I'm sure there's another word for it, but that's what comes to mind. We also, right now, we pay a couple of the building folks, not every building has one, a technology stipend for one teacher to be the teacher who goes around to the other teachers and teaches them how to use technology in their class. And now that we're paying someone to, if this plan goes through, paying someone to do either be full-time or half-time, they won't have to do that anymore. So partly that stipend will help pay for this as well. All of the IT hardware, software, infrastructure, if any of you have been back there to the stage, have you guys been back there to the stage? I know Ms. Roper has. Okay. It is much like the bus garage when I first got here. I'm not sure how it's met OSHA standards thus far. It is a dark, dangerous, crowded, inadequate space with, quite frankly, inadequate electrical service. And again, oddly enough, no complaints. They just sit back there in the, it looks like a little electronic hoarder's universe back there, but it seems dangerous to me. But part of this restructure would be that we create, and we've already started, quite frankly, create a receiving area out at the bus garage, because they do large batch processing of computers. They'll get in a pallet of computers, they have to image them, and right now those pallets get stacked inside our hallway. They come out here, they get 3 or 4 at a time, and they walk back there and they image them, and then they come back out here and they stack them up. This, we have a large room out at the bus garage that we are already dropping additional electrical outlets into and setting up stations where they can process batches of dozens of them at the time in safer conditions with electrical infrastructure that will allow us to do that. In addition, the IT director, since they won't report to instruction anymore, would report to the deputy superintendent, which you'll hear more about in a minute. People services, we are, again, focus. People services, as you've seen, that job is pretty enormous and the need's getting higher. We would remove anything from that, nursing, counseling, shoe coat fund, and have a focus strictly on people services. We currently have a part of how we pay for all of those services is that we bill Medicaid, and we bill Medicaid heavily. It's a work for our staff, but it brings in far more than what we have to put into it. You currently have a half-time position, but it's a long-term sub position that's in there. All we're asking for is that we continue funding that position so that we can continue billing Medicaid. Ms. Fitzwater previously came to this board, and she came last year, and denoted to the board, hey, I am really struggling to get speech-language pathologist, and part of that reason is both Berkeley and Morgan and Washington, I'm pretty sure, all pay $8,000 a year stipends to SLPs, partially because they have to have master's degrees, and they have to have their C certification, and we don't. So we end up contracting all of these folks at $85 an hour when it would be more cost effective to hire them. And at the time, the board said, that sounds great, but we don't want to do that and address this issue without addressing all of these other ones. So you bring it back to us when, as part of the whole plan, okay? And she provided you at the time, and we'll be providing you with again, all of the documentation that she brought together, all the comparisons with the other counties, all of the financial comparisons of the stipends versus how much more it's costing us to contract. And finally, gifted education, because by law, 2410, it has to stay in pupil services. That is a part of pupil services, that whole spectrum of kids. Ms. Fitzwater is right now working with a committee to bring to the board later on this spring a plan for reinvigorating our gifted program, which we don't feel like we've devoted sufficient time and attention to. Okay, and here's one of the biggest things. I'm sorry, I gotta take off this jacket. I'm dying. Can you crack that window? I don't know if I'm having like a personal moment or something. I'm stressing or something. Or maybe because this is a wool suit, I don't know. But it's the cleanest suit I had, so I put it on. What can I say? Okay, so you've seen, and I think that it's not a surprise that we have had a significant just wave of students needing mental health, social emotional support. So one of the tenets of this plan is that we create a separate standalone social emotional support department. Right now, part of what is just swamping special ed and the rest of us is all these needs are coming in, and we don't have an efficient way to process them or meet them. Right now, folks just get bounced around. They call up here and I've got this situation, I've got this kid. They might call Dr. Hoff, they might call Miss Lloyd, they might call Alex White, they might call Mr. Ebersol. And we look at them, okay, here's this program, this set of rules, this money, and this works or it doesn't, you need to call this person. Or maybe this program will work. And it's enormously frustrating to the folks who aren't up here. So one of the things that we would do, and I wish that I could say, oh, we'll hire all these new folks to come in here. We don't have the resources to do that, and I'm cognizant of that. But we would bundle together all of the programs that we currently have that meet those type of needs. Title I provides a significant source of that with school social workers, and mental health support, our at-risk program that gets resources for those students and for their families, our homeless program that provides them with, truthfully, basically anything that they need, from transportation to shelter to clothing to supplies. Our counseling program, quite frankly, a lot of times with our counselors are their lifeline. Our nursing program, our AmeriCorps program that Mr. White supervises, that assigns mentors to the middle schools, our past volunteers, our Bright Bites program, which also identifies people at risk for dropout, those social workers I mentioned. All of those are administered by a fairly tight group of people. We had to do some jostling, but that's primarily Mr. White, Mr. Ebersol, and Ms. Lloyd. And they would create a new department that's social emotional support. And part of their process would be, hey, we're going to do an intake process, and any kid who needs social emotional support, we're going to work on braiding these programs together. And you come in, and we'll have one shot, like, one access point. You come in, here's everything that we've got. Let's put together a plan for this kid. We might have to piece some things together. Again, not saying it would be perfect, but it recognizes a need that's coming and hitting us like a wave. It gives us a place to sort of put all of those together and figure out where we can put our resources to be the most effective. It also gives us a way when we're out really hustling for grants and for other things. We have two major sources that may be coming in. Number one, the legislature advocated for an increase in Step 5 funding for us to hire more social workers or mental health professionals or nurses or anyone in that field. And this would be the area that we'd apply that to. We also applied for a $9 million federal SAMHSA grant, which we made it through the first round, but we won't hear about for months. But if we do get, this would be the department that would be responsible for supervising it, for placement of any of the staff out of it. Now, to do that, we don't have the funding, and I don't know if we have the support to add positions to that. But the idea is that we would simply work with the staff to identify a director who'd be responsible for all of the organization and the creation of that process, and give them a stipend to process all of those things and provide supervision to the department. Business functions, so all of the things I just gave you, at least in my mind, all due respect, are job number one. Instruction, meeting kids' social emotional needs. Everything else we do is you got to do these things to support it. We got 1,200 employees. You got to get kids back and forth. You got to. They're all necessary, but they're business functions. So one of the things that we worked through was human resources and finance are the two things in this school system that every single human being we employ touch. Every single one of them, and they need to work well together. And some of our processes don't facilitate that. So we have an existing Secretary 3 position who happens to be very, very adept at process work and creating SOPs, process mapping. And their assignment is going to be process mapping with the support of the Deputy Superintendent position to process map between those two departments. Basically, one of the things that is, quite frankly, killing us is that substitutes, just the way West Virginia is set up, substitutes are largely a manual process. They were never meant to be permanent or ongoing employees, or they were meant to be sort of a rarity. And so tracking them and how many days they've been here and when they can work and when they can't, and where they can work and where they can't, and quite frankly, how they get paid, because it changes 3 times over the first 30 days that they're here. And finance has to change, and their benefits have to change every time with them. And the way that you track that and the way that you pay that is a largely manual process. And because our number of subs has grown and grown and grown, and the number of long-term subs and positions, it's creating a lot of chaos. So one of the things that, quite frankly, was on 3 different departments had as their number one priority to put more staff in human resources, because they feel like part of what we're doing is we're drowning because we have to have so many long-term subs because we can't recruit people. We're not out at recruitment fairs. We're not out chasing folks down because we don't have the staff. We can barely manage the staff that we have. And that position will be responsible for a whole host of things. We have a job description, which we'll get to you should you choose that. For recruitment, for substitute management, and for a host of other onboarding and process issues that we think will make some of these other problems better, because we'll have more staff and it'll decrease some of the chaos on the back end that we're running into. For instance, Cindy's department has 16 long-term subs in special ed, and they turn over frequently. So every time they turn over, we have to pull staff out of here and go sit down with somebody and say, hey, here's how to be a special ed teacher. And they don't know what they're doing. They've never done that electronic IEP program, and we pour all these resources into them, and they're a sub. Maybe they come back, maybe they don't. And then when they don't, we do it all over again. So it is in our best interest to devote some time and energy to getting people and having them here long term. That said, We also want to increase the human resources service personnel facilitator from 220 to 240. One, for consistency, but also because those 20 days during the summer are days that they're not in here getting service personnel to start the school year, which is sort of like great teams are made in the off season. It's your conditioning, it's your drafting, it's all those things that you do, making up new plays, getting ready for the year. That's what happens in a central office. If you've got a really great school system, your central office is busting their butts during the summer so that when school starts, everybody's like, woohoo, staffed, trained, ready to go, got all my supplies, things are great. We don't do that because guess what? We just send people away during the summer and say, oh, you can do that work when you get back 2 days before school starts. So, and you get what you get when that's what you do. You gotta pay people to come in the summer and do the work if you want the school year to run better. Another one of the business functions that we think we could do a better job at is consolidating all of our safety and security functions into a single position. You know, people wax and wane. All it takes is like one shooting, and then all of a sudden people are way up in arms about school security, and then they kind of forget about it for a little while, and then something else happens. The reality is all the rest of this is for naught if we can't keep kids safe. And right now there are pieces of that in a lot of different areas, and quite frankly, sometimes in areas where it's not their highest priority. If you're a maintenance guy and the principal's yelling about the toilet overflowing, you're not really that interested in whether or not their door's sticking and sometimes the alarm works and sometimes it doesn't, or is this vestibule really secure? So the proposal is that Dr. Hoff's position, she's the director of attendance now, but that we take some of those responsibilities, homeless and a couple of other things, shift them for other folks to do some of that work, and she takes on all safety and security functions, including supervision of all of our security staff from the school system side of things, all of the camera systems, which are not functioning so well in some places, all of the committee work that's going to be done for our 10-year plan, and her relationship with law enforcement and with our local courts, I think will prove invaluable in that. We also want to create an innovative partnership between HR and finance. Both our HR facilitator and our assistant treasurer sort of volunteered for that, for us to sit down and figure out what processes are working and which ones aren't, and where we can create sort of some new ideas that will make less work for both of those and make the experience better for our staff. Right now, both of those departments are running like the wheels are falling off, and they're working pretty darn hard to, and sometimes West Virginia just doesn't help them, but sometimes things that we've done the same way for a long time doesn't help them either. So that if we get better systems or better integrated systems, they wouldn't be doing so much manually. Finally, all of the business functions would report to the deputy superintendent. And you're like, we don't have a deputy superintendent. Well, that's because I'd like to take the assistant superintendent for operations position and convert it to a deputy superintendent. To your point about leadership, if I get hit by a train, there should be somebody who we've been training and who's been involved in everything that I'm involved in, who's ready and willing to step up. And I'm not saying this person would be hired to be the next superintendent. That's promised to no one. But you need somebody, you need more than one head that's filled with all, not necessarily all this crap. Let's be honest. But the crap that matters, okay? You need somebody with that in their head who will serve as the acting superintendent. So basically the idea is that all of the instructional leadership would report to the superintendent, so we had consistency in the instructional program, and all the 8 operational staff would report directly to the deputy superintendent. Now, there'd be crossover between those. I'm still responsible for all the operations, deputy superintendent still has to know all of instruction, but primary day to day. And part of what that does is it sets it up so there aren't brand new leaders reporting to brand new leaders, meaning everybody who's new, because some people have chosen to go pursue their life's dreams elsewhere, which I'm still in the process of finding the forgiveness in my heart for. And it's really just pure bald selfishness, but, which I've admitted I've confessed as much too. But, so everybody who's new would report to me, and then everybody who already knows what they're doing would report to the deputy superintendent, who would report to me. So that way you don't have, I don't want to say the blind leading the blind, but you don't want to have a brand new person leading a brand new person about what their job's supposed to be. The public information officer would continue to report directly to me, partially for consistency on communication. I think we've made some good ground with that, and God bless Hans Vogel, he's worked on a lot of new tools to get us to be able to talk directly to people, make them feel heard, make sure folks know what's going on. And part of that organization, we've had a lot of conversations, we need to direct some to customer service expectations, like consistency about how we respond to people and what they should expect from us. The cultural diversity staff development coordinator position, which the board, again, much like the speech language pathologist, deferred until this whole report was done, would report directly to the superintendent. Again, they would both report to me and serve as the civil rights officer, which previously fell to Mr. Soltis. Not sure what CTE and civil rights have to do with one another, but my hope for that position in an ideal world, we would be monitoring all of our staff development to make sure that every piece of that had embedded our values on diversity. Like, I'll give you an example. When we did the balanced literacy, when we did the balanced literacy program, one of the things, remember how we asked you for book rooms, for money for book rooms? So I asked Sherry, I said, well, they need to send us a sample for their book room so that we can see what we're buying. So they sent us this stack of books. There must have been 30 of them. And I took them all home, and Jericho's like, those are a little easy for you. Yeah. But so I looked through all of them, and one of the things that I came back and talked to Sherry about was, sort of kept a tally, and out of the 30 books that we had, not a single one of them had a Hispanic child or Hispanic family in it anywhere. This company's based out of California, for God's sakes. And so we went back and had a conversation with them and said, that's our largest population. We can and we won't put these out here until you can find a more diverse representation. Because if I'm sitting in these classes all day long, year after year after year, and I never see a book with a kid who looks like me, shame on us. So those are the kind of things that a cultural diversity coordinator catches when they're looking at these things. And when we're doing staff development, I'm not just training you on balanced literacy. I'm saying, and within that, what are some of the things that you might be sensitive to while you're teaching this type of lesson? All right, and I think that we'll get a lot of traction with that. I hope so. So I've been talking a lot. I promised myself I'll keep it to less than an hour. And I invited all of the central office employees to come here because this is, even though you gave it to me, it's theirs. And I was very clear. I said, come whether you're for it or against it. Whether you think, if you've got a better idea, please God, let the board hear it. And I mean that in all sincerity. So this is the point at which anybody who wants to stand up and speak, I'm going to go sit down and until everybody's heard and has what they have to say to the board. If that's the will and pleasure of the board. Awesome. So thank you guys for coming. Go up.
No timer, Laurie.
No timer. Go, for, against, whatever you got to say.
Well, I think it's a great idea. I mean, I like the idea of focus on instruction, being in career tech ed and doing Title IX and some other things. You know, I've gotten proficient at doing facility use, for example, and I feel like I do a pretty good job at it. But I think if I had that time to go do career tech ed stuff, I mean, that's what I do. That's what I like to do. So I think it's a great idea to have that focus.
Can we ask questions?
Oh, absolutely. I just wanted to give them a chance to talk if they have some. I wanted it to be after you knew all this stuff so that it made sense, whatever they were talking about.
So who would do the Title IX things that you used to do?
The new diversity person,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of makes more sense.
Mm-hmm.
and then I would pick up the, virtual school.
And facilities use would go to the administrative assistant to the deputy superintendent.
Say it again, so what's that?
Facilities use, which is another thing that Mr. Soltis is responsible for, would go to the administrative assistant for the deputy superintendent.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'll just say that I think, I'm pretty excited that we're addressing the social emotional component. I don't think it comes as any real shock that we're bleeding out in that area, so to speak. And I don't think that's a problem that we're gonna intervene our way out of. We can only intervene so much. And so, also because it affects me directly. We've never built a new department in my time here, so that's an exciting thing. It's also a little bit, you know, there's some angst to go along with it, but I look forward to seeing how that could take shape, because I think that it's paramount.
So there would be a director over at-risk Title I, and is that the model? There would be a
The-
director.
The model right now would be that of the 3 coordinators, whoever was interested, we'd interview them, and whoever was interested in sort of taking responsibility for all of those roles would be given a director's stipend, rather than hiring a new director position.
Mr. White, I have to say, I'm highly disappointed in the fact that, you know, you spoke and it was not in rap form.
I left my hat and my shades out, so I wouldn't have felt the same.
I certainly support the idea of having a person that can just focus on instruction. I think will make a huge difference between that and bringing in the coaches at all the schools. You know, it just is going to be a lot more emphasis on instruction, making each school's academic coach multifaceted to help with new teachers, coach on initiatives, and also help with integration of technology in the classroom. And then having a director person here that can work with those coaches, so it's not a separate between technology and academic coaches. And it's I see a lot of positives in that way.
I was gonna say, I have to agree with almost all of it. We kinda have a hand in everything in my department. And so super excited to start over here with someone to focus on curriculum for us, cause if you think about it, even for special ed, it all starts in the classroom. And for us to have those coaches in the classroom to really work with those new kids, teachers to differentiate, and even some of our older, or maybe just didn't get it and they're going by, but to really make them those educators that can differentiate into multiple levels. And having our students, whether you are special ed or you're not, to have them be able to stay in that classroom with a teacher that can differentiate into separate levels, but keeping them with their peers as models, which we know as research-based shows, that's the best place for them. And on the other hand, going over on this side, I am very excited and a little weepy that Mary Ellen will leave me. She's my counsel. Okay. You don't understand. Heavy heart on that one for me. But knowing the amount of work that we do on that end as well when this is going on and over here, and yes, that's important, but knowing the fires or whatever that we have to circle and come around with, and the knowledge that she's gained from me and the knowledge I've gained from her on what she does. But if you ask me in a heartbeat, I tell her when stuff comes up, I go, this is her, this is what she does, this is what she's good at. And to cut that off and not automatically go to I'm having issues with emotions and I'm acting out, doesn't make you someone that needs an IEP. That is someone that we need to give support to, and we have shown that by doing the trauma-informed care and working at them. And that's being successful where our students that were kind of put over here because they couldn't behave for whatever reason or withdrawing or acting out are now 98% in general ed and are looking to spend maybe one more year just within and they're done. We have some success stories. So to have that bridge or that little curve in the road that they don't come quite right to me first or to our department, not that we're not there and not that we don't want them, but to maybe make sure we're doing it for the right reasons, and that we've looked at the whole picture, and that we're not always, you know, oh, they're misbehaving, but why? You know, I don't know if you've ever driven by what we know, someone where a parent is laying on the grass while this child's waiting for a bus because mom is high, to be direct. But do you understand that that little girl still came to school? And whether she's withdrawn, acted out, or whatever, sometimes we do have to look at the whole picture. So,
So the gifted program will still stay in your department?
yes, it is.
And how would your department work with instruction?
At this point this year, what we've correlated, and actually Christy Horning, we try to meet all the time with curriculum, and as they design or look for curriculum, we work together. I work very closely with actually all three of them, with our System 44, our Read 180, and our interventions to try to make them, it's not a special ed class. Okay, we wanna make sure that we're hitting the kids that are coming in, just we're seeing little bits, you know, maybe you're just not getting this or wherever, but focusing it on that, it's a class for all.
Yeah, partly, I think, trying to strengthen the core instruction, how like with balanced literacy,
Mm-hmm.
there shouldn't be a need to pull children out for a reading class in
Right.
elementary nearly as much, because the balanced literacy is designed so each child in the class has a reader at their level of how they're working through. So say theoretically then, those kids should be able to stay in the general classroom more frequently. And the other good thing about this, I was gonna say, is we're just asking for one additional position, and we've looked through all of our existing people out in the schools and all the funding sources, from early literacy to Step 7 to Title I, Title II.
There's still possibilities actually in the Title II.
Yeah, but I mean, that's kind of exciting. It's like one position we're asking, and there might be funding available for that, but it's just looked at all of what we have out there doing things and trying to bring them together and getting a similar focus and utilizing those funds just in a lot more efficient way in those individuals.
No, go ahead.
I just want to say though that while clearly there's a sharp distinction among the different departments and their functions, it's very important to understand that the social emotional piece affects the true edge of our proficiency gains. Again, we have pupil services, which we affectionately call special ed, and Title I, as you know, is a much broader piece than just Title I. There are several titles that respond to that, including Title IV, which is all about social emotional well-being. There's actually a federal fund that supports that. But what's very important is that those gains are actually made with this population of children that, again, Ms. Fitzwater so eloquently described, children who are academically ready, but are not emotionally ready to learn. And we are already, again, as you probably know, our Title I schools serve as a laboratory, not only for children in poverty, but also for all children. And we already have, again, Dr. Gibson mentioned, we have social workers. They're actually clinical social workers. And for those of us who've been in therapy, we know that this is a licensed clinical social worker. Most people don't go see a psychiatrist, they go see a therapist, and that therapist is a licensed clinical social worker. And we have 2 of those working full-time in our Title I schools. And we are all, again, I already have all the Title I principals. We've already doubled that up. We used to only have 1, now we have 2. They are already clamoring to go ahead, Mr. Service, just go full tilt. In fact, my ambition really is to ramp that into other programmatic levels within our school system. And eventually, of course, should the grant arrive, we would have that in all of our schools. Remember, it's the service, though, not a position. That's a little bit of difference. In other words, but the important part of all of that, within that laboratory in these Title I schools, we have good data that fortunately our provider keeps track of for us, but shares with Mary Ellen and me. We already know that, say, discipline referrals are going down. Time in class for children is going up because the child who has the bugaboo has a therapist who's actually on a regular, daily, sometimes twice a week basis is seeing the child, coping, and also supporting the family. I think that's important to say. But when we use the term social worker, I think it's important to say, again, we're still gonna have our shoe and coat fund. We are still gonna meet the physical needs of our children for our homeless program, which Title I supports. That would still all happen, but again, this is about the margins, because we cannot, yes, we can focus on instruction, we can have better instructional strategies, and that certainly, again, this is a very human business. That's the whole focus. I'm so excited about having an academic coach in every building, because that was one of the things that I did, right? put an academic coach in every Title I school as soon as I could within our program. So I'm highly supportive of that initiative, because that bolsters core instruction by having that academic coach. Ultimately, the people, those adults, right, that supports that. Similarly, this focus on social emotional learning will support those children who are just because of family issues or personal therapeutic issues, not related to, again, something like my child has, who has an authentic disability. I hope he's not emotionally despondent. I think he's emotionally ready to learn. But again, to support these children, and to be honest, we do see academic gains with these children once their true emotional needs are reconciled. And to be honest, I'll be very frank, I think this not only affects those children, it affects the entire school. The school culture changes because teachers are no longer thinking of children as problem children who misbehave. They are thinking, oh my goodness, like Ms. Fitzwater said, that little girl I know was lying in the yard, the mother was lying in the yard this morning. And when you see a child like that, who is a hurt child, who needs emotional support, it just changes the whole, we're better people, those of us who are privileged, if you will, and have relatively good mental health, are better off when we're in an environment, because again, even the adults do better because they're not dealing with these emotionally dependent children. I'm sorry to go on, but anyway. Do you want to say anything, Ms. Lynn? You're the only member of our team.
Just that really, the three of us spend a lot of time together. I'm gonna lose my office-based aerobic activity if we're in the same department. Because we already organically do a lot of this work, and when Dr. Gibson presented this, I thought, oh, she knows what we do without us ever talking about what we're doing. Truly, the departments have spent a lot of time together, and it would be better, I think our kids would be better served when we're more focused. And it's been very exciting. This social work program was an idea that Lee had based on looking at research, and because of what I do, I knew exactly where to get who we needed, and we've built I've spent a lot of my time here building very strong partnerships with agencies that are thrilled to work with us, because we're on the front end of this. Other school systems are going, you did what? Truly, and so the idea, I get like goosebumpy. I think that's what I said to Dr. Gibson, the idea that we can build on this work to support our kids, and we do see incredible academic gains when our kids feel safe and secure and cared for. Just like, you know, if you had a good breakfast and a good night's sleep and you feel good about where you're going, you can do your work, and our kids need that extra support. So I'm thrilled with this idea, even though I walked away going, wait a minute, the workload didn't change any, but I think the
None of you were supposed to notice that part.
the setup, I think, is really ideal for us and for our students.
Well, will you be giving up some responsibilities? Or will they do?
Alex and I have worked very closely on the homeless situation, and he's pretty much, other than I'm doing the data entry or the tabulation as far as reporting at the end of the school year, or by October 1 really, Alex has had that ball in his court, and I'm glad to see that it's melding into the other two areas. That really, I mean, we have found that it's really great when Alex and Mary Ellen can get together and figure out how best to help a child with their basic needs. And I think it'll help the schools knowing they don't have to depend on me to answer a cell phone or a message when they can go to Alex, and if he's not there, to Mary Ellen, to get a resource for a child who needs it right now. And that's gonna be a good thing.
So you'll be by yourself?
I got sued, don't you?
You know, somebody can, run and be in the
Then I'm
school
gonna be
for
really
it.
against it, so, no, I think it's a great idea to, yeah, it'll be Sue and I back there.
Anyone else? I promise we don't bite.
Nothing from HR? The only department up here that we're asking for a new staff person for?
We didn't get it, so. Well, we got that, but.
You're like, we don't have it yet, so we don't
Yeah,
get it.
I mean, I just like to know more of like exactly what that duty is gonna be. I know that the board wants recruiting, but there's a whole lot more back there than Then, Shelby needs a real, now we're gonna be down to like 2 secretaries supporting 5 people, which is gonna be, it's hard. It's gonna be hard. That is the only issue that I would have with it, would maybe ask for another support person, because that would be, Candace is retiring, but her position's still staying.
Right.
So,
Right, and her position would be filled plus the new professional position. Right.
and there'd be 2 of us back there supporting 5 people. Shelby pretty much is on her own now. And then Mr. Cooley is supporting, I guess Rachel supports him. And I support the rest with the help of Mary Beth.
Yeah,
but-
I help, but I wouldn't be helping that.
That she's not gonna be helping. I just,
But Joseph is very much looking at reallocating amongst those positions and making sure that, we have some cross-training so that, if I'm out, hopefully someone else can answer a question. So we are looking at those things. It's just a matter of what that's gonna look like when it all fleshes out at the end.
The one thing I would say is thank you to Dr. Gibson for realizing safety is very important. I had the privilege of being on an accreditation team that went through Henrico County. And I saw a lot of what they did that, was just the norm for them. And some of it needs to become norm for us. Children learn in a safe environment. Our staff teach in a safe environment. And part of that comes with the hardware, the software. How do you harden a building as we're developing new buildings? How do we provide line of sight? How do we secure the building internally? There's just so much to it that we have piecemealed things together. The camera system, I was asked at a meeting this morning from the sheriff, did we get those cameras fixed so that if something's going on, our guys can log in externally? And I'm going, no, it's down here on the list. But those are things that are very important to the well-being of the entire school and the community around it, and I'm excited to see that coming into play.
And I'm excited with the timing of the Safety and Security Committee with our 10-year plan and our bond, because I think it's a chance for us to make a big uniform leap forward, because some of our newer schools have a host of features that our older schools simply don't. We have schools that don't have camera systems, and so.
Ms. Dodson could translate this conversation for us, but she refused not to. But she often works, as you know, with vulnerable populations because she supports Mr. Soltis and me. But she's very graciously and very enthusiastically, by the way, as we were even waiting to meet with Dr. Gibson to hear what the plan was, we're very excited that Mr. White and Ms. Wright-Lloyd would come be part of our group and work with Wendy and Marty and myself. So we're, right? What? You do know the whole world knows Wendy Dodson. And that's funny. They may not know who Lee Everson is. They know who Wendy is. So we're very grateful for that. Seriously, Wendy. And if I may, I'll just take one other little privilege. One of the things that truly excited me about this process, and there were things that, I'll be honest, didn't, but one thing that I was truly excited about, when Wendy came back from her debrief with Dr. Gibson about this, Wendy heard the same messages I heard. And it means a great deal to me that we honor within this building that we're teams of people. Now, it is true, yeah, I got more alphabet soup after my name, and yes, it's true, as everybody knows, I changed my dissertation topic because it's now on this topic as opposed to ed leadership. But the reality is that Wendy heard those same messages. She came back understanding the same things that I understood about what the reorganization meant, the reasons for doing it, is that, when Mr. White, I had to wait a few days to talk to Mr. White about it, because you went before me.
Man, I had to leave for lunch right after.
We had to wait to talk about it. But I was so thrilled that, again, that Wendy got to be an integral part, just as I was part, that there was I thought that was very key, the common messages that honor the team, especially as you move forward to develop a department. So thank you for that, Dr. Gibson. We want to honor the integrity of the process.
Thank you. The other lesson to be learned is if we ever do need to recruit anybody, recruit them from Hardee County because they'll.
Exactly.
There you
Yeah.
go.
That's true.
I see Sheena on Friday, which I'm gonna make a note of, yeah.
The 240 position, would that be the only 240 position here in the board office?
No, both of the facilitators would be 240. We only have 2 facilitators. Which one, the technology facilitator or the human resources facilitator? Those are only 2.
Okay, so those two would be
They
240,
both be 240, yes ma'am.
and everyone else would be 261.
No.
So, is it possible to get a chart and
Right.
to kind of see
Mr.
that?
Fogel's working on an org chart for everyone. He's got one that he's putting together that's proven a little challenging, but I should have that to you guys shortly. Yeah. So you can visualize it. Yes, ma'am.
I have a list of anybody that's over 200.
Right. Okay.
I can forward that to you.
That
You
would
can
be
look
great.
at it. I have
Thank you.
anybody that has an extended contract on a separate list.
So I can give that to you along with the org chart.
That's extended contract when you're here?
There's a lot of extended contracts. There's 240 as fax teachers. There's,
No, I mean.
She meant just
yeah.
Just
I can sort it that way, but yeah, I can send
Yeah,
it
by
to you.
work location, that would be great.
The deputy, what else look that person? What does the job description look like for that person?
Part of it looks a lot like the superintendent's job description, only it's focused on the supervising the business operations aspect of it in terms of efficiency and best business practice, because they would supervise finance, they would supervise HR, they would supervise IT, they would supervise maintenance, they would supervise transportation, they would supervise nutrition, they would supervise safety and security. Basically, we're business. We have an $80 million a year budget and 1,200 plus employees, and our ability to recruit people, keep them safe and comfortable during the day, and give them the tools that they need, that goes a long way to us recruiting people and keeping people. Everybody wants to work for, Google or Amazon. You want to work for a company that, number one, you think they're great, they have a good reputation, and number two, they do a good job of taking care of you every day. And so part of this person's job is, yes, you supervise all these functions, but again, and this is what I hope we're getting to. Don't just look at everything and fix something when it breaks. Like, sit down and look at an employee experience from the time we're trying to get them to come here, through onboarding, through working here, until the time they leave. How do we treat you? What's your experience? Do you work in a warm, safe, comfortable place? Do you have all the tools that you need? Do you feel like when you call us and need something, you get what you want? Do you, just the running things from a human perspective, all these things should be set up so that the human beings, because that's what we are, we're in the people business, not making television sets. And so if that functioned more seamlessly, quite frankly, because they're kind of, they're all these little standalone places.
So who will the director of instruction, pupil service, and
All of those
emotional?
report to me. All of the instructional people would report to me. Cultural diversity, public information officer, director of instruction, director of pupil services, director of social emotional support. I have to see it in front of me, but yes, you have a list on your thing.
So, do you envision your leadership team being
Expanding?
those-
Yes, ma'am.
that group?
I think it gets larger, and I think that's a good thing. Mhm.
My only two thoughts were, as we expand those pieces of more social workers, the guidance counselors, the nurses, and the people that actually deal with those needs at the school level. Making sure that we possibly have, I mean, I know we have Mary Ellen as the one kind of person to report to, but I know that that's really hard with all of those significant populations, especially as you move a nurse into every school, and you know who's representing them, who's making sure that they have staff development that's making sense for them, they sometimes recognize those needs before anybody else does, because that student comes to their office. So, you know, making sure that there is some kind of a leadership person, if you will, that can represent those groups to be able to then make sure that the information is being disseminated up. And it doesn't mean just waiting to see if, you know, if Mary Ellen gets my email or my call because you've got some other crisis with another population.
Cindy and I both have talked several times about,
We've gotten enough nursing staff that we probably need to go back to the idea of a lead nurse, somebody who maybe half time of their job is that responsibility, AED machines, training. As you know, we always have issues keeping nurses and getting substitutes. At least 2 days a week, I'm on the phone at 5 a.m. trying to get everybody covered where we need coverage. And so you're right that I don't get all those pieces up in the air, kept up in the air.
Yeah.
And I think as our staff continues to grow, the board would be wise to consider putting some resource time of a nurse toward coordinating those things.
That, and I'd like to see somewhere someone responsible for athletics and the arts
yes,
and the system as a whole, because I feel like that is a population that, as far as the central office, we have zero representation. And I know when we have in other systems I've seen, and even that we've been a part of, the person who is the business manager of operations actually managed every field in every building across the entire county. There was a master schedule. Nothing happened anywhere that wasn't known in one central location. And I think as we move forward with that, with One Jefferson and knowing what's going on in all these places, that's an area that we've got to have some kind of leadership in.
right now, God bless Mr. White's heart, jack of all trades. That last year we started with having all of the middle and high school ADs meet once a quarter with him, sort of writing herd of, you know, what issues are you having? Let's get some consistency around coaches and coach evaluations. Let's talk about scheduling. Let's bring Parks and Rec in and have a conversation with them about scheduling. It is one of probably a dozen hats that he wears, and we have heard that from the ADs. They appreciated us bringing them together, but we don't have someone that leads that. We don't have someone who's in charge of the arts and making sure that those things, it's always the instructional staff who's sort of picking up on the side. Yeah, entirely.
I just think as we begin to move forward, I don't know how we can move forward without at least looking at trying to do something, even if it, to begin with, incorporates arts and athletics as one piece, to be able to, I know even when we lost both drama folks at both high schools, and I thought, wouldn't it be great to have had somebody central to know that those things were gonna happen. You know, what can we do to not just get one person, but get two, or do we get one and they have assistants instead at both schools, and then they manage, you know, for the values of the performances and the equipment and all the things that we're gonna put out as a system, just to make sure that, you know, we have what we need. And
That's
somebody
actually,
on top of it.
that's super interesting, because when we did, I think Pat was at Wildwood. We did a walkthrough at Wildwood, and David Vines was there. Love him. As much as, but I love him. He was doing an archery, unit, I guess, and he had borrowed the equipment from another school who had gotten a grant to purchase it, and he was writing a grant to purchase his own too. And I was like, you know, we could just buy like 4 sets of these centrally, and you guys all set your schedule and rotate them, because one of them gets a good idea and goes and scrambles and writes a grant, and they get something, and then somebody else hears it and says, well, we don't have that at our school, and then there's an argument because we don't coordinate it centrally. they are all scrambling. You know, they're scrambling to get, you know, curtains for their stage, or, where's the best training for this, so.
And I think
What you
as
say makes
much as,
sense.
yes, we have said to you, and, you know, as we can see with this, instruction needs to be our main focus, but arts and athletics, in my opinion, are also part of instruction, because for some of them, that's the only reason they're in school. That's the only reason they're successful with the rest of instruction, is due to that.
But also with this group of students that we're talking about, I mean,
Yes.
let's be honest, for my child, his
Yes.
favorite class is art.
Mhm.
Thank God for Miss Burkholder, I hear about her every day.
I will echo what Lori is saying, co-curricular and extracurricular. I hope that we can be a system that the charter schools would envy, because we have so many interesting and fun activities going on in and after school, but you have to be a part of our school system to participate in it. That right now our competition is homeschool, but you know, if we have things going on and we have somebody or a department that makes sure that the buses are there, the trips are planned, the money, I understand that that's, you know, a big deal, who pays for what and what pot it comes out of, and posting jobs and all of that, but we've never had anyone in the past 15 years at the central office that is their main responsibility, and I think it could be huge as far as Jefferson County Schools and what we value.
So am I hearing correctly from the board? I just wanna make sure that, cause part of this is, I'm not asking you to vote on this today or anything, I'm just positing these were our best ideas. And it sounds like one of the things that you'd like me to go back and talk to folks about is whether it's a position or I would suspect it would be a position, that we'd go back and look at creating something that centralized all of those functions, whether it was a coordinator for athletics and the arts, or whether it was some sort of counselor, for consistency and doing exactly what you said, to make sure everything's available to folks, who organizes this, who's responsible for a degree of equity across the system. Is that what I hear you saying?
And if I may, we're already doing a laboratory of that in the Title I. We already have all of these extracurricular, they're called clubs, but that's a major initiative that I've begun with our Title I. So rather than having the kids stay after school to do worksheets, which we don't get a lot of return on, we have gazillions of clubs going full-time in all 4 of these title schools, everything from cooking clubs to language clubs to volcano clubs to all sorts of things that are that same idea though of capturing those kids, engaging their minds, their hearts, those kind of things. So we're already doing that on a laboratory level at the elementary level.
Would that include athletics? That's another situation where lots of money needs to be spent and on with equipment and fields and all of that other stuff that needs to be done on a rotating basis.
Yes, sir. If I hear the board correctly, it sounds like you would like for it to be, as Ms. Roper said, extracurricular, co-curricular, so it will cover music programs, art programs, drama programs, and athletic programs, all of the things that we do outside of pure direct instruction that keep kids interested in schools. And again, as I said earlier, we have got to cultivate a customer service mentality. Families, there will come a time when we are not the only game in town. And right now, that's the purview of a very few who have the resources to be able to homeschool their kids or to be able to send their kids to private school. And this legislature will eventually, they will find a way, they will eventually get to the point where other parents have that choice as well. And we have got to position ourselves to be choice number 1. Or we will continue to lose funding and it will be ugly.
And they were trying real hard to do that this year.
Yes, sir. I don't think we have a lot of time to reorient ourselves and quite frankly, as part of, Mr. Fogel's focus and our focus in trying to get more communication, we do a lot of amazing things now. And people have to know what they are, they have to see who we are, they have to feel like they have a voice. And then they'll stick with us, they don't have a reason to leave. Because they love our teachers, they know who their folks are, they know they're gonna have a great experience, they know all these awesome programs are available to their kids. They're not interested, so there's no foothold here for anybody.
And the scholarships also, opportunities.
And when you were talking earlier about Mr. Vines and writing the grants, I mean, I know we've looked at before at having a grant writer specifically for that, but, you know, again, we do seem to do a lot of that in and around all those places, but that may be something going forward, that maybe it's scholarships and grants period. That position is funded by a percentage of how much you write, or you get paid based on how much you bring in. You know, I don't know how long-term we'd be able to do that, but I think for someone to be able to focus on that as well. But I think definitely we have to start with at least athletic and arts, because if we don't make that a priority, then it's not a priority. And it is just as much as special ed is instruction, and all these other things are instruction. That is instruction in my opinion as well. And so I think we have to prioritize.
And I would presume that includes before and after school programming.
But to add to that, I hope we don't get to a point where whomever is in their job title, that's everyone looks to that person to do it all. For example, the staff development, everybody has to do staff
right.
development. Technology, everybody needs to, you know, be doing that. Have you spoken with the principals about taking their tech people out?
Well, we did. Now, we have a meeting Thursday with all of the principals together. We've spoken with all of the Title I principals. We had a separate meeting with them, and we've met individually with principals who had technology stipends in their building. And they are all aware about the placement of instructional coaches in their schools. So part of what we've talked to them about, and we're gonna elaborate more on, is with those instructional coaches, we have a technology facilitator, instructional facilitator, and they're responsible, because all those coaches have 210, right? 210-day contracts, woo! And so those extra 10 days are for staff development. And so they're gonna get together and they're creating sort of this master list of all of our instructional programs and all of the technology programs that we use to support those, and cross-train during the summer so that they're all responsible for embedding the technology. We still have the 4, what we're calling office repairmen in here. They're still going out to all schools, setting up computer systems and, you know, making sure that the carts work and delivering technology. So that's still available to the
So it's still
principals.
gonna be if my printer breaks, it's just that's who my person is.
You said we only need one more instructional coach.
Yes, ma'am.
To have an instructional coach in every school?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Now, they won't all be full-time, some of them will be half-time.
Some will be shared, yeah.
Right, we'll have, help me remember, because I didn't bring the list in, but
Yeah, the
I
title
think,
schools will have their own dedicated coach, because they already have that. The 4 Title I schools will have their own dedicated coach. And we're looking at possibly one of our middle schools, 2 middle schools having a dedicated coach, because one of the coaches works in technology also. It helps with live grades, like Todd Chikoricki, for instance. He does a lot of support types of things, so he wouldn't have 2 schools assigned, because he does other things other than just being a technology resource facilitator.
so the other thing that's coming on the heels of this, so that everybody's clear, and we've talked about this a little bit before, you know that West Virginia and several of the school systems in West Virginia got audited by the IRS. And they came to us and Mon, Ohio, I can't remember what the list was. And they basically said, hey, you can't hire people, you can't contract with individuals. You can contract with companies, like, for instance, and it's probably Cindy's the best example. There's a company called Soliant that we contract speech language pathologists with. Pay them $85 an hour, they send us whoever they have, however many people we ask for. And on the other hand, you, Lori Ogden, are a licensed speech language pathologist, but you wanna be able to stay home with your child, and you don't wanna work for us full-time because you wanna be able to set some things yourself. And you go and pay $35 for a business license with the state, and then you come contract with us and we just pay your hourly rate. The IRS, and we do that with some instructional coaches, retired teachers, things like that. The IRS has said, if you don't belong to a company, then you're not paying the employer portion of your taxes, you're just paying your own personal taxes, and basically you're cheating us out of taxes. So either a person has to be a part of an actual business, a company, and all of these people that we've been paying just straight contract, hey, I'll pay you $50 an hour to do this job, and they say, great, they get a business license, they sign a contract with us, those have to become positions. So we have several instructional coaches that we're just contracting with them individually. Michelle Cantley, hey, you're a great instructional coach. Her contract has to turn into a position. But those were people we were paying already. We were just paying them as contracted people, and now we have to have a position. So new positions, only one. But we will be converting, and not just in instruction, in several places. We're gonna come to you, and there's gonna be several conversions, interpreters, and just a whole host of things where, quite frankly, we've been trying to save money and be flexible with people, so we just contract with them, go out and become your own company, you know, which in West Virginia is pretty easy, and we'll sign a contract with you, and they have, we're in negotiation with them in the hopes that we don't have to have, that we can do everything and have all those changes made by July 1. They had originally set a date of April 1st, and said you'll either get everybody flipped over by April 1st, or we'll start penalizing you a monetary penalty every single day. And we've been scrambling. We sent out messages to all the principals, because even little things like the band at J High, they signed contracts with a choreographer or a drum coach, or
Even some kids that come over from Shepherd get maybe $100 from Shepherd, former Jefferson band students, and it's like, we gotta employ them, we can't just contract them and give
But
them.
my understanding with that is if we have someone that is, they have set hours, they have, even if they have an office, they're employees, because, you know, we set their time and things like that. But to come in and, like, we have presenters come in, we do a contract with them, and it's for a certain amount of money, but they come in and do a certain job, and then they're gone.
Sure.
They wouldn't have to be
no, ma'am,
employees.
that's a great question. They actually, and I can I'll send it electronically to the board. They gave us sort of this side-by-side comparison to say, I don't know why the sound on that's turned on. Actually, the sound's not turned on. I don't know why it's done that. But they gave us a side-by-side list that basically said, here's how we gauge the difference between a contractor and an employee. And some of it is, do I provide you with a computer? Do I provide you with staff development? Is it an ongoing thing, or is it a one-time thing? So there's all these criteria for how they judge the difference, and that's how they decided. So, again, concurrent with this sort of reorganization is also gonna be us coming to you over the next several months and saying, we'd like to do it all at one meeting, we'll try to get it as organized as we can, but here's all the dozens and dozens of people that we pay on contracts that we're gonna have to flip over somehow to, yes, we pay you 20 hours a week to come in and coach at these places on PALS, because it's a very specific assessment and you're great at it. We've gotta convert that to a half-time position, which is gonna be hard because those folks can now choose to take benefits, which we didn't have to pay when they were contract employees. So, some folks were gonna, and that's our struggle, is I could afford to pay you for 20 hours, but now that I have to pay your benefits, you can only come 15 hours a week because it can't cost me that much more money because I don't have it.
So you're in referees at the middle school football games and things like that. And,
Ticket
some of
takers.
our
Ticket
schools go
takers.
with- yeah,
Ticket takers.
Some of our schools pay.
I understand the service, personnel law with the ticket takers, but not the referees.
The individuals, some of our schools use a company and pay the company, which we find. And the school that doesn't do.
Go with God.
they're
Go
gonna
with God.
have to
Don't
go
feel like you have to
they're
hang
gonna
on.
go with the
Thank
company.
you. Thanks for your public support.
They'll have
Thanks
to
for
go
your
with the
feedback.
company. You know, most of our schools pay a company. but
Thank
they
you
don't
very much.
pay the individual referees.
Thank you.
You're not allowed to leave, Janet.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
She didn't mean you.
Sorry, they've had a long day. I just wanted to let everybody know they weren't.
That's my main
they
thing.
left.
Wanna make sure that we don't
We'll have to go through that.
go too far off the cliff where we can't hire anybody unless they're, you know,
We're not-
the job is posted and all
Our
of
summer
that.
school math tutors that came from Shepherd, it was like, you know, we gave them maybe maximum $600, I think.
Yeah, we just signed a contract and said, can you do this many hours with us? And
This is gonna be prohibited from doing that, I
Right.
believe.
No,
well, we're gonna
my understanding that.
well,
We're
we're
not gonna
fighting
have a
for
great
what we
choice
can
in
and
this.
can't do.
Yeah,
Sir?
we're not gonna have a great choice in this, we're gonna have to follow their.
We don't want
guidelines.
the.
They're very
IRS
specific.
finding this, you know.
Yeah, well, part of what we're doing is putting together a list, and we're sort of, we'll be vetting it with the IRS person who's assigned to us, who did our audit. And sort of going through and testing the waters and say, these are the parameters, this is the side of this, you know, that 2-column sheet, we think they fall on this side. And if the IRS person says no, we can kind of be like, well, if we changed it this way, would they fall on this side? We're trying to figure that out, because you're right. It is killing us right now. I mean, there are probably, how many people do you think's on that list that we identified? 40, 50, 60?
I have 55 alone.
Yeah, okay, so Lee has 55 alone. We either are gonna have to flip those all into positions or find a way to meet the IRS's criteria. So I don't wanna hijack this whole discussion off of that, but I'm saying that that is a piece of why we're trying to do this. That's another fun opportunity that came up that we have to deal with, and we have to deal with it now, because if they start penalizing us, it will climb into the tens of thousands of dollars quickly that we won't get anything for. It'll just be a penalty to the IRS.
We are enormously grateful it's July 1 instead of April 1, because these, we can plan for
Yeah,
that.
that's what that's what we've requested, and they've gone back and forth about that, so I don't wanna put in
See,
a
it's a done
stamp
deal.
saying it's a guarantee.
Right, no, we went with the April one.
But imagine if, well, we do, we're ready for April.
We have to do April one, we have no choice.
Less than a half-time position?
Yes, sir,
Yeah.
Kim?
And, you know, like some of these things might like be a third or a quarter.
That is our hope, if we have to convert them, that we can do less of those. Now, again, that's yet another one of those things, that's this weird configuration that poor HR and finance will have to come up with new job descriptions, new postings. We'll have to set up a separate finance track for them because they don't have the same, schedule track as everybody else. So every time we have to do one of these weird off things to make things work, that means everybody who supports that person has to come up with a new process. They have to do a new, it's just, it creates a lot of churn.
That could, if you can do that, that could, that could mean that those people, even though they're on the payroll, that they wouldn't be necessarily, you wouldn't have to pay benefits.
Benefits. Although they do, I will say this, there are very few cases where you don't have to offer benefits. There's typically I don't wanna say a penalty, but they look for people trying to circumvent the system to not pay benefits for folks. And, you know, partially at the end of the day, we're a human services organization. As much as we wanna save money, we're not looking for a way to not give people benefits, I gotta be honest. But most of these people were contracted, so they didn't have benefits already, or they had another way to get them, so they'll probably be okay. I met with several of the instructional coaches about that, because we're gonna have to flip them over. And they were like, you know, my husband has benefits, or I don't need them, but once we make it a position, we have to offer them, and you have to plan on paying them no matter what somebody says their circumstance is. They might leave and you get somebody else, so.
I would say with the, piece we brought up so far, looking at the additional staffing positions, making sure that we also can continue our AP additionals into the schools that we have been trying to stay.
And again,
on top of
you're
that.
right, we set out a plan 3 years ago for adding APs at the elementary level. You remember we flipped over the non-teaching head teacher, which was basically being an AP, but don't get paid for it. And we've had the rubric, which we've done every single year, to say who's next in the next 2. And I will tell you where it's going to kick us in the teeth if we don't get on it. And I'll be completely honest, it's Ranson. Ranson is a model freaking school, but it's a model school because Deborah Corbett is one of the best damn principals I've ever met in my life. And if you don't get somebody in there who can walk with her, work with her, train with her, get the trust of that community for at least a year, and she's put in her time. She's earned everything she's got. If she decides to walk away tomorrow, this county still owes her. But if we don't do that, that fall is gonna be so hard, so fast. It's a school that if it didn't get somebody super strong who understood how it ran, who did that work, all due respect, it'll be the difference between Pat running North Jefferson and North Jefferson as it's become lately.
So we gonna attempt to get in that rotation?
I would love to, and again, part of this is the will of the board combined with the finance of the board. All those positions cost money. I would love to, and I would strongly recommend that we add at least 2 elementary AP positions moving forward. But, yeah, and part of that was us trying to be cautious up here. So out of this whole plan, I'm asking you for 2 positions and 1 goes out in the schools. I'm asking for 1 position up here. So partly because we keep pouring resources into the school, we think that's where they're needed. I gotta be honest, cause one of the things that I didn't even do this part of the presentation, but so there's a lot of things that could go wrong with it, and I go over that, but I'll give you this presentation. But one, there's a lot of positives about this plan, you know, addressing social emotional, support instructional focus, consistency, putting resources in staff acquisition and support, which is what's gonna help us if we get more people and they stay here, and putting most of the instructional resources out in schools instead of up here, addressing safety holistically. But some of the problems is that we didn't take a thing away from CO when we did this. I just rearranged things. I didn't give these folks up here any less work to do. We got a lot of new people coming in, all of whom we have to orient at once. We put in a brand new department. We're not giving them a dime more or another person. And, you know, that whole high student to staff ratio up here, and we just keep pouring resources in the schools, which is where it belongs. But who supports those people? That's our job. When we don't do a good job, people come to you and they say, HR sucks. I didn't get paid on time. You're asking me to run this new program and I don't know how to do it because I got an hour staff development and nobody else has come back to see me since. Hey, guess what? So-and-so, I called them 3 days ago and they haven't called me back. I called Mary Ellen 2 days ago and she hasn't called me back. I need help now. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't solve all of those problems, and then all of these are great ideas, and putting more APs out there, more staff out there, and on some level, it's more people for us to recruit and hire and train and support without putting anything else up here.
And we also recognize the fact that when we did take those cuts, we did not cut it at the kid level. We cut it at this level. So, I mean, that's not forgotten either. So,
Being a person who has worked here, and 15 years ago when I started, I wasn't in CNI, and then I was in CNI. I think the main part of that I hope doesn't get lost in who's in and who's out is the amount of time that we met. Because when I first started, Dr. Nichols would have all of us meet around, we did it in his office, but all the professionals came, and we went, and you talked about like hot topics, things that could affect somebody else, but you heard what was going on, so that when you're doing your thing, you're not in a bubble, and something comes up, you can say, oh yeah, so-and-so does that, or so-and-so should be able to help with that. So when we went over to CNI, the good thing about that, even though it was a lot, we were still all together once a week, you know, getting an idea of what the different departments did. So I'm really hoping that this reorganization, I'm sure you will find a way to keep communicating and working together across, you know, that you're not in just separate little departments. Another question, we had talked 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, about HR and finance coming together. Are they gonna do that?
They had both asked about that during this whole reorg process. And some of this is yes, so part of this plan is moving technology out. And one of the things that we said had to happen before we could do that was, number one, we had to get rid of a lot of paper. Some of what's stuck in their offices and hemming us in is huge filing cabinets full of files that we return. We've digitized a lot of those. And the other piece is if we can help technology get out to the bus garage, we'll have room to put them all in proximity in the same place. Part of that is it's money, because we walked through with Ralph, we'll have to both take down some walls and build some more for them to be in the same space. But yes, ma'am, that was one of the things they both asked about.
Who wants to move?
Varying levels of enthusiasm. Let me be honest with that. None of them, but I will say this, if they move, they both have to move. There's no way we can move one of them into the space of the other. It'll be an unholy nightmare. Flat out. They know it, I know it, I'd say it if every one of them was sitting in here. It'll be a dogfight. And some of these changes are, we gotta have higher expectations for getting along and working together and having processes. And, you know, all due respect, sometimes people do the things that they do because they're so stressed and they're so overwhelmed, and we don't have necessarily good processes. And, you know, you work for West Virginia, you do things West Virginia's way, and it is not intended to be efficient always. So I wanna make sure, and, you know, thanks to everybody for being here, but I wanna make sure that I hear from the board, and maybe you need some more time to process too, if there are changes that you wanna see in this before you consider actually voting on it and giving me the authority to start moving forward with these. I've heard though a couple of things, and I'll incorporate those in the plan and send it back to you. But anything else that you think of now or over the next 2 weeks? And then when do you want me to bring this back to you as like, okay, here are the changes, here's everything that I'm asking for.
The
Tell
only
me yay
thing
or nay.
I would like to have in the next couple of weeks, I know it says specifically that Joseph is gonna look at that in HR. I know that, you know.
He actually has it mapped out, but.
Okay, so I kinda wanna, because again, I think to us, I can't take one more phone call or email of someone saying, I'm trying to work in your school system, but I can't because I can't, it's this or it's this roadblock, or I'm having this difficulty trying to get hired, or, even today I got an email or a text message from him saying, thank you so much for all your help, but I'm moving to I'm gonna go ahead to Maryland or Virginia. And I can't do it, I don't know why. And they had raving reviews about the people that they spoke to when they were able to, but it's even at the state level, it's not just us, I get that. So, which I replied back, you're coming with a teacher's license from someplace else. Have you ever considered just going ahead and taking the West Virginia Praxis exam? You can do that. No one's ever told me I could do that.
Okay, that's because the one person who handles licensure is also the person who's responsible for getting every substitute in the system, tracking the number of days that they're here, and notifying every one of the probably of professionals, we got maybe 700, 800 plus. Every one of those professionals, when their certification is coming up, what they have to do to get it, I mean,
Yeah.
just
So
the
I think
stuff we ask one person to do.
Right, and we recognize that there's
Mhm.
got to be some more people there.
Mhm.
And so I think that would probably be part of what, you know, what you're asking for and what they're gonna ask for. But I'd like to see at least a little bit more development because it's such an important part of what we
And
do.
part of this is I brought you big picture. So when I met with each one of the departments, like HR, all 4 of those windows had these giant white sheets hanging down where they had every person in their department plus the new person if they got it and what those people would be doing. I don't even want to tell you the level of detail that finances had about what everyone will be doing and their timeline and their time of year. But I'm not going to bring all of that to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'll bring to you whatever level of detail behind these things. Some of it is, if you guys looked at me and you said, social emotional support department, we're a school system, that's kind of silly, people eat us alive in public, we're not doing that. I'm not gonna pour all this other work into, you see what I'm saying? Like, I have to have some idea of how you wanna move forward, because then what I have to have is, give me all the job descriptions, let's finish the org chart. I need pricing out of everything that all these things are gonna cost us. It's just, we'll do more work when you step down that road, but if you're standing right here and there's 10 different ways you can go, I'm not gonna flog the staff over, go 5 miles in each direction and tell me what each one of those would look like. So I gotta have an idea of what you get behind and what you want, and then we'll keep. The further you go down each road, I'll give you more and more and more detail. Here's job descriptions, here's costs, here's, with the idea that, again, one of the things that we have to do is if we're gonna make all these shifts, the sooner I can post jobs and let people know what they're doing and start working towards that, the better. Yes, ma'am.
So we work on 100% employee reimbursement. How many, isn't that what it's called? Where you
Tell me
get
what you're talking about.
the number of employees that are paid locally as opposed to, we get reimbursed from the state.
Oh, the number that we're up
Formula,
for.
yes,
There you
yes,
go,
the
yes, ma'am,
formula,
I see what you're saying, yes, ma'am.
So,
We have a list for you of how many people are, we are
yes,
over the formula.
yes, we have that list and, the stipend, like, chart.
Okay.
Of like what directors would make, what,
Mhm.
deputies, chiefs, coordinators, and you said you wanna get an idea of what we will and won't get behind. I'm still not real comfortable with there being, like different people working different days, because really the difference between 240 and 261 is paid vacation. And we saw it with the high school coordinator, you know, they get in and they see, what? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just hope we can find a balance with that so that people come in, they know they work at the central office, they don't have to guess, you know, am I getting paid vacation or
Yes, ma'am.
Or have to work at
More
Walmart.
than happy to do that. They're a big group of folks up here. I tell you what, how about in this packet, so I have the stipend chart, over the formula, I'll revise the plan with the athletic, arts, things on it, and the, grant writing scholarships. And I'll also include a list of all the positions at central office that aren't 261. How's that? Do you also want at the same time, we have our, we call it the rubric of need. We have our rubric of need, and so I have the list of like who's in line to get another AP next, an elementary AP next. Do you want that chart?
Wouldn't be a bad idea.
And one more thing, the positions in the board office, when you, when they come out, we'll see where they are, but the ones that have stipends and how many days they work. Because there are some service personnel that have stipends and some that don't, and kind of get an idea of what that looks like.
Yeah, I'll bring you this stuff, and we've been working on the org chart, and part of it is we got really ambitious, is we're trying to create this electronic org chart where you scroll over it and it has a drop down of here's because what we hear all the time is people don't know what everybody up here does, and so they'll call Alex and say, do you do this? And Alex is like, no, that's Mary Ellen, or they'll call Cindy and say, do you take care of this in your department? Actually, no, that's in Lee Eversall's. And so we would have a sort of a drop down a list that explains who's responsible for what, like what programs that person does. But
Without the names though.
we won't just, no, it's just titles.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of work. And so the having the drop down, like when it's fully built out.
No,
So we'll just have the plain org chart that says, here's who reports to who.
I'll just contract somebody to do it for you.
Some more
Before July 1st, we're okay.
Yeah, gotta get July 1st,
Gotta
there you
get done
go.
early.
Thank you very much for doing this. I appreciate it, and everybody else for being here. And, if you don't have anything else, I'd like to ask for a motion to go into executive session really quickly, just for a legal update.
So moved.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Yes. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Twice on Sunday.